Do you like high performance storage? I know I do also. And there's a lot of options out there for storage-based operating systems. TrueNAS is pretty darn good. As a matter of fact, I would say it's leading the pack at this point. And today I'm going to show you a complete beginner's guide, taking you through all the steps to get up and running, going through the user interface, creating a share, and installing apps, taking a look at their new LXC container integration, which is very exciting. And we're also going to see what kind of performance we can get when transferring some files. So who's this video for? This video is for anybody that's a beginner to TrueNAS, and certainly it is a highly opinionated take on a very generic pathway to get up and running with a pretty secure setup and pretty performance setup. It would also work just very similarly if you had a desktop and a USB. So while I like the R730XD, especially its price point and its cool features like that KVM and the remote ISO mount, this can work with your USB, a couple of hard drives, a desktop class machine, and maybe an NVMe or two. All right, let's grab our TrueNAS ISO, go to TrueNAS, click the Download Community Edition, click on Download and scroll on down, and we're gonna select 25.04.0. As of this time, usually the one on the left in green is the stable one, which I would highly recommend you only consider that. Let's save that to our desktop. So we've downloaded the ISO. You've got some options here. You can burn a USB, and you can do that using something like Rufus, and you can get that at rufus.ie or Balena Etcher. You could also, if you were really old school, burn yourself a CD, or a DVD actually, and I don't think you're gonna do that, so we'll just leave that behind. But we're going to be using something a little bit different. We're going to be using the remote ISO mount on the KVM that we have with our R730XD. And you should definitely check out the video that we just dropped also on that, because these two videos dovetail together very nicely, talking about the hardware and the software side of a high performance storage server, the R730XD, also at $200, a very cheap, effective way to store 12 3.5-inch hard drives. Not easy to find that for that price point. So once you get to the point where you have your ISO downloaded, we're going to mount that up inside our iDRAC. iDRAC is basically what you would get if you installed a USB, booted, and it'll present the same screen, and we'll get a KVM. So we'll have keyboard access, mouse access, and also, of course, the visual display. Let's get to that. We now have this loaded up. Let's go ahead and install. From the disks that you've got presented, you can see we've got a bunch of the 12.73 TB. So quick thing, 14 terabyte is 12.73 TB. 12.73 TB is your usable space. We've got our Samsung, and that is not what we're going to use. And then we've got our ADATA. The ADATA is the SSD. This is the one we're going to use. Hit the spacebar to select that, enter. It's going to erase everything. Proceed with the installation, and click OK. Create a new admin password. And you can allow EFI boot if you want, if you think that that's important for your system. If not, it's fine to select BIOS. For this system, for an R730XD, BIOS is fine. We're not doing secure boot or anything like that on this. Okay, when you get to this part, go ahead, hit OK, reboot your system. So just click on that. After it boots up, it's going to give you some information about your interfaces at the top. It'll also give you a couple of options if you wanted to make some changes from the CLI. But at this point, you're good to connect to your system on one of the IP addresses listed. We're going to set up also our 10 gigabit networking in the next part of this video. So we're going to go to 244 to get started on our system. TrueNAS_admin. And so once you land on your TrueNAS page, it's going to give you a dashboard that has everything in a really quick viewport. You can also use the configure button to add additional widgets if you wanted to. And once you are in the edit mode, you can also use the pencil icon to change the layout from the drop-down. And of course, if you make changes, you want to hit save. We're not going to change anything here, however, and it's going to give you things like your CPU core temperatures. You can see we have 128 gigabytes, about 125 reporting as being usable right now. It gives us our CPU model number and our average CPU usage. we don't have any tasks, we don't have any storage pools. It does give us information about our network link that we have here, but since we have 2 network links, you may want to actually go ahead and add that second one in. So go ahead and add in another networking link and have this be for interface Eno2. Yeah, that looks good there. Click save on that. And then when you scroll down, you can see you've got your secondary internet. This one is a fiber, so we'll be using this when we connect to our fiber connection. So that's the dashboard. The storage left sidebar menu here is where you're going to go to create a pool. We won't do that just yet. I'm going to take you through the steps that I like to in a specific order so that you arrive at a usable share as easy as possible. Datasets are something that you can think of as organizationally a thing that lives inside of a pool. So think of it like a child inside the pool. And you can have multiple datasets inside there, and they can be different types, and I'll show you those differences. Next, we've got our shares. Of course, you've got your traditional Windows and Unix. Of course, if you wanted to go with something like iSCSI and block storage, you can definitely do that also and use something attached to it along the lines of ZFS over iSCSI with Proxmox. Very nice, very nice. Data protection is really going to talk about where you are backing up, how you are snapshotting, and the rsyncing tasks to other machines. I'm not going to take you through all of those setup tasks, but those are important. So do make sure you have backup set and also replication. So you're in charge of your own data security. That's a big job. And let me tell you, if you don't have a offsite backup of your data, that's going to be a problem eventually. And I don't want that to happen to you. I would hate to see you lose your data, your pictures, your important documents. So make sure you have an offsite backup of your data. If you are looking for an offsite backup, you can also use the TrueCloud backup, which is encrypted and offsite. You do have to, probably pay some money for that. It depends on how much data you have. Coming over here, we've got our network interfaces, and you can see that Eno3 and Eno4 are our gigabit, and Eno1 and Eno2, not connected right now, are 10 gigabit connections. We have the host name set to TrueNAS, and the domain, which is basically the .blah, is .local that we've got set here. Do keep in mind, networking is handled maybe a little bit differently than you might be expecting inside TrueNAS. For credentials, this one we will make a change. We're going to come to users. We're going to add a user. So the user we're going to add is going to be DSP for me, and I'm not going to give it an email. I am going to allow SSH login with it. Aside from that, the rest of it, I don't intend to change anything. Make sure you have SMB user checked, however, because that's important. That's going to allow us to create our SMB share really, really easily. If you go to credentials, you can also see your user groups. So you can create a group that, if you create just a user, it's going to create a group for that. So DSP got created there. If you wanted to have a group that was non-admins and have multiple people living inside that, you could set that inside their profiles also. So you would just go over here, hit add. You can also adjust privileges that they would have at a pretty granular level. This is one of the reasons that TrueNAS is so big in its adoption, is that it is very well supported and it has really great enterprise features that allow for really granular control. Next, we're going to come over to instances. And instances is basically where your VMs are going to live. And you can see we don't have a pool, so we can't create anything yet. But once you get to the point where you have a pool, then you can select that and you can set up your virtual machines. I'll run you through setting up just the most easiest of virtual machines when we get to that step. Apps is basically Docker. And so Docker is going to, when you click on check available apps, it's going to bring up a catalog. This is really cool. This brings the features that you might be looking for in something that is really easy to use like Unraid into TrueNAS, and it doesn't use Helm charts. This uses Docker, very standard, very easy to use, and lots of great things. You can also search, so if you wanted to look for something like Olama, I don't know, is it not in here? Do they not have Olama installed? I thought they had Olama installed. Oh, they do. Yeah, so they've got Olama there, tons of stuff. It's alphabetical, so you can just kind of scroll down it. Here is reporting. And so reporting used to kind of be net data. Now it's back to not net data. I expect at some point in the future it may go back to net data. It seems to happen quite frequently. You can select which statistic you want to take a look at from here. That's CPUs, disks, and the information it's going to provide you is not necessarily what you're expecting up front, what you're typically going to see if you're looking at like a Windows Task Manager. But do keep in mind, this is actually really good, especially with things like ZFS, to keep an eye on once you have your pool set up to see how much utilization is happening and how that utilization is happening. The final sidebar menu thing that we're going to go over is System. And if you come over to Update, you can have it check your updates daily and download if available. I would actually recommend unchecking that. Once you are comfortable with your setup, you can manually do it. And I think this is a let's manually do it kind of thing. Coming back over here, go to General Settings. You can see that it's got basically your information. It's got your GUI information. You may want to adjust some of the things here in your GUI settings. So if you wanted to adjust things like your web interface so that it automatically went HTTP to HTTPS and forced that, that would be something that you could do. Also, if you want to enable usage collection for statistics, you can do that. I am going to disable that and hit save and continue. Log out. Refresh. There we go. And my user does not have privilege to log in. So I did want to show you that. My user has privileges for doing things like SMB, but does not have administrative privileges. Like I said, very secure. You can give them those permissions to your users. It just is something that you need to explicitly do. And coming back to our general settings and going down a little bit more, you can have your NTP servers. If you have external NTP servers, the Debian ones are fine. I run a local NTP service, so I don't have to rely on external, and everything is synced to the same NTP server at the same time, and I run that off my OpenSense box. And just change that there. That's pretty much it. Your localization, if you needed to change your language, would be done here. I do need to change, however, my Chicago. Austin is in that time zone. And you can change your date format and stuff if you wanted to also. It's up to you. Your settings for SMTP is something that I would recommend setting because if there's a problem with your system, getting notified by email is not a bad idea. Moving on, we'll go to the advanced settings. This is cool if you wanted to do things like configuring or changing some of your init and shutdown scripts. Don't just do anything in here willy-nilly. You definitely want to make sure you know what you're doing here. If you wanted to change the location of your storage boot pool, you can click this and it will allow you to change that from here. So if, for instance, it ended up that it was installed onto disks that you didn't want, you can kind of migrate it that way. And it'll give you the option, if you have GPUs added in, to isolate them so you can do things like pass them through to a virtual machine. If you have two virtual machines using the same GPU at the same time, you're going to crash if they're both launched at the same time. So keep that in mind. You don't want to do that. Next, we'll go over to boot, and you can see this is basically giving us information about our boot environment, and we have this installed, of course, where we saw on the boot pool, which is where I want to keep that at myself. And if we come down here to services, you can see the services that are running. Now, we're going to end up having SMB running, but it'll automatically enable. I would recommend keeping FTP off. In FS, however, if you're going to be doing Linux shares, is something you probably want to enable. And also SNMP, if you're wanting to gather some remote statistics, is something you're going to want to enable. SSH, if you need to remote into your machine to do some terminal stuff, it's pretty cool to use that. It's better than using the built-in terminal that they've got here. And of course, UPS allows you to connect and get statistics from your UPS so you can have graceful shutdown if you're running into a power issue. Next, coming over to shell. The shell is, well, it's not copy-paste friendly, and I would recommend if you do need to do stuff in the shell, SSHing in. So that's that in a nutshell. And your alert settings. Here you can define things. Again, you need to have that email set up, however. And audit. This is like a big report. If you had a bunch of people logging into your system, you could find out who, what, when, and this does a really good job of doing it. And so that is a pretty cool way to get an idea of what's happening. You also have some cool controls around audit logging for your SMB shares. So setting up our storage pool. Like I mentioned, we're going to create a pretty standard storage pool. This is really, it's not going to be fancy. It should have easily 10 gigabits per second of performance for our network, so we can match up the performance very well. That's really the goal here. And we're just going to call this storage A. If you wanted to do encryption, I would recommend that you make sure you do download your encryption key. And if you lose that, you are totally hosed. Nobody can help you. Keep that in mind. And for the layout, we're going to do a RAID Z2. And the disks that we're going to use are the 14 terabytes. And the width that we're going to use is 12. And we're just going to have one VDEV. 12 and one VDEV with a RAID Z2 basically gives you 2 drives that will, if they fail, you'll have the chance to swap that out. You could also, if you wanted to, go with a D-RAID. However, I would not recommend that because there are size usage issues with the number of files you're writing to it that it can become a little bit complicated. If you're looking for pure performance, mirrors would be the way that you would want to go. And you might set that to a width that was even as small as 2 and have 6 mirrors. That would give you, if you look over here on the right-hand side, an effective total raw capacity, though, of only 76 TB. But it would be really, really fast. Now, if you lose one drive, you're okay in a pair. But if you lose the second drive in that mirror pair, you are hosed. So that one is a little bit risky. You might want to do something like a 3 and a 4 if you're looking for high performance and also a lot of security. But at this point, now you are down to, it looks like 50.93 TB. So it takes a pretty big space hit if you wanted to go that route. Keep in mind, 14 terabyte rebuild time is going to be pretty decent. If you're looking at like 22 terabyte drives, I see people going for really, really big drives for storing important data. And man, don't buy all the same drives at the same time. Make sure you're staggering the buys of those drives so that they're coming from different lots. Don't do stripe unless you're like, I want to destroy my data. I don't think I need to say that, but I'll say that. Don't do stripe unless you want to destroy your data. RAID Z2 is pretty good. RAID Z2 is like, this is the standard. If you wanted to have a hot spare, by the way, you could do 11. And you can see that would give us a total raw capacity of 114 TB. And that would give us actually a spare that would automatically pop in there if there was an issue. Pretty sweet. I've totally bad blocked these drives and used them for a while. I know they're all good, so I don't feel like I have to do that. And with a RAID Z2, I feel like it's probably okay. If I was doing a RAID Z1, I definitely would do this, however. So that's one thing you might want to keep in mind. If you want to, at any point during any one of these steps, redo it, just hit the reset step. So like I did that right there because I wanted to come back and reclaim that disk that was probably going to be parked there. Now, if you did a mirror or a stripe, I'm sorry, and you did this and you did 12 wide, you can see the max total we would have is 152 TB. Of course, like I said, your data is toast. It just, don't even think that it's not going to be toast. It's going to be toast at some point in time. So don't do that. And next we're going to come down and look at log. You don't need to set a log device unless you are wanting to sync your writes for things like a database or possibly a VM. And you definitely want to have a high performance device. Some Optanes can actually be really good here also. So keep in mind, Optane, very well suited for this, especially some of the smaller size Optanes can be really well suited for this. If you wanted to get one of those Optanes and put it on that carrier card, could be really good for a log device. And here we've got spare. Like I mentioned, if you wanted to set up a spare, you need to have it be the same size as the drives that it's going to be replacing. You're not going to be able to have a spare be a smaller drive. So your L2 ARC cache, if you have maybe 32 gigabytes of RAM, this is probably something you would want to do. If you have, well, you can jam tons and tons of RAM into R730XD. You don't need to set a cache. In my opinion, it's kind of overused for the benefits that it's going to provide. I wouldn't bother with the cache unless you have, and know you have, files you're going to be actively working on that are bigger than the amount of RAM you have. So in my instance, do I have more than 128 gigabytes of files that I'm going to be working on? And let's talk about like a use case like video editing. You can run, I think the largest production that I had was about a terabyte of raw stuff. That's a lot. And to edit that on the NAS over the network is, it's just the ideal way to do it, to be honest with you. Doing it locally gets to be cumbersome. And also you can't search through all of your images and stuff really succinctly, find things, index things. So using your network share is what one of the primary use cases is. So if you're doing a 1 terabyte or a 2 terabyte production, 8K, then yeah, you would probably want to consider that you might need some L2ARC cache. So your metadata devices. This is really probably the best use that you can have for something that is a high performance NVMe or SSD. Like we're going to be using our SAS SSDs. Each one of those can hit about a gigabyte per second. So we're going to use that here, and we're going to set up a mirror. The reason why is if your metadata dies, if your drives with your metadata die, if the metadata part of your pool dies, your entire pool is hosed. So if you don't have redundancy on it, you're setting yourself up for massive failure. So don't do that under any situation. We're going to have this be 2 wide with 1 VDEV. Matches perfectly. Dedupe is an awesome option, and if you, I probably will end up adding in some additional carrier cards with that 4x4 bifurcation like I showed you guys. It's a great option. You do want to have redundancy on that also. Another one of these, you cannot just have it fail out kind of devices. And let me tell you really quick which ones you can have fail out. You can have your log fail out. Your spare is, of course, not exactly a special device. It kind of is, but it's just like a hot spare. Your cache, you can have that fail out. Your metadata, you cannot have fail out. And your dedupe, you cannot have that fail out. You will have to restore from backups if you do. So say that to yourself over and over. It's very important that it doesn't fail. Very important. So we've got everything done. Let's go ahead and create our pool here. And that is pretty much it. Very simplistic pool. There's a lot more complicated ways you can go about this. There's a lot more performance you can get, like I mentioned, with going with things like mirrors, but for a balance of space and also efficiency and pretty decent latency that we should be able to achieve, I think this is going to work out really good for us. It'll give you some information about your setup now on the storage page. If you go back to the dashboard, you'll see that you now have a storage pool populated also right here. So it'll give you some information, tell you when your last resilver was. Hopefully everything's gone well if you see that, and also give you information about disks with errors. So keep an eye on those 2 things, last resilver, disks with errors. We're going to create one more storage pool here, and you can see that this one is going to be our apps. And we're going to select this. It looked, okay, so I didn't clear the NVMe and it had some ZFS stuff. So that'll clear it. It should have shown up there elsewise. And we're just going to set this up as a stripe, and it's only going to be 1 wide and 1 VDEV. So you would want to have active backups of everything that goes onto this. And ideally you want to have 2 drives in a mirror for something like this also. There's no other options that we have, but we'll go ahead, create the pool here and continue. Cool. And it's going to give you a warning if you're doing something stupid. So this is, you don't have redundancy. It'll also possibly sometimes give you things like a warning on a metadata device if you have a kind of mismatch in the way things are set up and configured. And basically it's around the failure scenarios that it'll alert you. So you should pay attention to that. So if we come back over to our apps now and our configuration, we can choose a pool, and we're going to choose our apps pool. It's going to set up Docker and everything for you behind the scenes, and now we're going to check our available apps. Of course, like I mentioned, Olama will install that really quick. Click on confirm and agree. It's going to give you information on in nice little drop downs here. This is actually one of the easier ways to get running with Docker, in my opinion. And you want to select from the image type, default image if you're using NVIDIA or if you're using CPU for inference. You would want to select ROCm if you're using a AMD GPU, which we're not doing that. If you had additional environment variables, which this channel has shown you a tremendous amount of additional environment variables, you can also check out digitalspaceport.com and go to the 2K build guide. I think it's a complete dump of all the environment variables and options. There are some that you definitely want to make sure that you use. Now, if you look at your API port, you want to remember this. This is 30,063. You could change that to something else also if you wanted to. And coming down a little bit further, you can see that we've got the Llama data storage set to IX volume. So the data set will basically be created automatically. You don't have to do a ton of stuff. You can set permissions and other things here if you wanted to. That's going to be completely up to you. If you wanted to add additional storage, then you could set a host path and you could have that host path be on your machine. So we're not going to create a second one. We'll just leave it as this for the storage configuration, and we will not add additional storage. I guess labeling is a nice thing to do. CPUs, I mean, we got tons of CPUs, so we could assign this something like 22 CPUs. And RAM, Llama loves RAM, especially if you're using it for anything that needs a lot of RAM like most of these LLMs do. I think you could set that to 16,348, 384, 384. And if there were GPUs, you would tick this box to pass them through. There's no GPUs connected to this. Click install, and that's pretty much it. So setting up an app is really just following through the drop downs. If you have questions, check out the TrueNAS forums. There's hundreds and hundreds of these apps out there, so couldn't cover them all. But this is a really cool app library idea. Really a strong play by TrueNAS into the benefits that was probably one of the strongest that Unraid had, which was the ability to have very easy access to an app store that was pretty point, click, go. And this is very point, click, go. So big hats off to them on this. Hopefully there is not too many issues that people run into. I know this is a recent-ish feature, and I've been waiting a little bit of time because I wanted to make sure that if there were problems reported, that they had time to work through them, and it looks like most of them have been. I'm sure that there'll be some things here and there, but it looks pretty solid, and I think I would consider it production-worthy, at least production-worthy for a home lab at this point in time. It does take some time. I know that there possibly could be a little bit better feedback mechanism. If you're getting antsy there, don't get antsy. Don't click all over the place. Just chill. Just hang out and chill. You can open a shell up here, and you can do an Ollama PS, and you can see that your typical Ollama is just, it comes with no models downloaded. So if you wanted to download a specific model, you can go to the ollama.com website. And of course, Quinn 3, all the hotness right now. And so I'm going to pull down the 4B. This is just a good size, in my opinion. So for CPU, and keep in mind, we're just doing, oh yeah, you see. So that shell, Ollama pull Quinn 3 4B. Yeah, the shell also, you can't use the up key, so better type it right the first time. I don't like that. I'm going to say that. I don't like that. I hope they change it. I think a lot of people hope they change the shell. Okay, there we go. So now we're pulling the Quinn 3 4B down. It's going to go at whatever speed your network's capable of, and especially when Ollama is going gangbusters, it might be a little bit slower sometimes also. Okay, so after you get the model downloaded, we're going to run it. This is just running on CPU, so we'll see what kind of performance we get. Addy. I'd say that's in the 5-ish tokens per second range, which not that bad considering. But you can see that it does work, and of course, like I mentioned, the shell, this in particular shell, not necessarily the way that I think you would want to go about that. So looks like things working great on the app side. Definitely is a huge delay during installing apps. Let's just select the pool for apps here. Leave all that stuff as is. Click save. Okay, got the network in there. Now let's go to create a new instance, and we can select a container if we wanted to, or a VM. So container, LXC, and if you browse the catalog, you should have a kind of decent amount of LXC options here. Actually, this looks very decent. So let's do a Debian 12 bullseye bookworm. There you go. and we'll call it Debs. Just leave it empty, that way it can kind of use whatever it wants. I think if you wanted to pass through disks, so if you wanted to pass through, for instance, a SharePoint or something like that, you can do that here. And yeah, that looks actually pretty decent. You could, if you wanted to pass through USB devices, pass them through here as well. Click on Create real quick, and hopefully we have a very fast setup of our LXC container, which LXC, oh, I think I am more and more excited by LXC every single day. LXC, oh yeah. And you see something here that we don't have in Proxmox. That is integrated Docker, integrated LXC, right? Integrated Docker, integrated LXC. Now, of course, you can run an LXC and install Docker in it. You can run a VM and install Docker in it. But this is pretty cool. This is actually, I think, very user-friendly. And I'm excited. This makes me actually pretty excited to see this happening. Can I just launch it into a, there's a shell. Hey, what do you know about that? We'll do a uname A. Hey, look at that. We got our Debian 6.12.15 production image right there. And if we do a inproc, we should see all of the system's 88 processors pass through to it. So sweet, we've got apps, we've got, those are Docker, we've got LXC, and you also have VMs. If you wanted to run some VMs for certain things, like especially Windows, that might be a little bit easier of a way to go. Now we're gonna go ahead and set up a data set. You can think of a data set as living inside of your pool, and you could also have a zvol. Now a zvol is gonna be kind of a little bit different. We're not gonna cover that in setting one up in here, but if you wanted to do iSCSI, basically block storage, think S3-like storage that you would be able to mount and access and treat like a local disk from a machine, a zvol would be what you're looking for. If you're looking for kind of file stores that you traditionally would associate network shares with, that's going to be a data set that we're going to add. So let's go ahead, add a data set. I'm going to create a super generic one here, and we're going to call this, for our specific use case, media share. And we're going to select from the dataset presets SMB, and it's going to auto assign a name to it. If you click Advanced Options and you scroll down, you can see some that you might, if you were, customizing this for a specific use case, want to go ahead and set. For instance, the record size being at 128, that's pretty good generically. However, if you have very large block sizes that maybe you have very large files that are going to be residing in here, for instance, in this use case, a media share for remote editing, it's actually okay to go all the way up to 16 megs. However, you don't want to have that be without a special metadata device. And you want the special metadata device to catch everything else that's kind of in between there. So we're going to put this at 1 meg for that. Now, that can eat up quite a bit. It might be best to go a little bit lower, but again, sizing this for your specific use case, I probably don't have that many files, maybe some photos and stuff that I add in, and I'm usually pretty conscious about making sure that I have an under 1 megabyte size for an image. Now, if anything is between 1 megabyte and 16 megabytes, it's going to take 16 megabytes. So be very cautious, know your use case, know your sizing, and if on the chance that you want to be a little bit more space conscientious, you can shrink that down. However, I will say, this is going to give us some insanely good performance. So we'll click save on this. So a file under 1 megabyte is going to go to the special metadata device. Everything that is elsewise is going to be 16 megabytes. For video files that are absolutely gigantic, that's going to be pretty okay. After you've done that, it's going to say, do you want to start the SMB service? Click on Start. Okay, next we're going to come over to our shares folder, and you're going to see that we've got our media share folder here. Now, if you look here, you can see that we've got a couple of options: edit the share ACL, edit the file system ACL, edit just in general, this is just going to edit the share, and delete. You also have the ability to run logging. If you wanted to change that, you would need to change that inside here and enable audit logging. Not a bad idea to do that. It can really give you a little bit of heads up on what's happening on that share. And if you come up here to these 3 dots, you can configure your service. I know, there's a lot of options here. Make sure your work group is the same if you're doing traditional kind of work group sharing. And now we're gonna actually go ahead and see if we can see it from this machine that I've got over here, even though this machine is not the machine we're gonna do our performance test from. This is just my recording machine, and it just has a 1 gigabit connection. So we can see TrueNAS showing up here and media share showing up there. Next, I'm gonna go to new, and I'm gonna just create a text document and hit enter. And then I'm gonna go ahead and delete it. And that shows that we have full CRUD, create, read, update, and delete on that folder. That's exactly what you want to have. So the next thing that we're going to do is remote into our machine that does have 10 gigabit network connectivity. Now we've got 2 connections to our system. We've got a single gigabit network connection, and we've got a 10 gigabit connection. As you can see, that's ENO1 interface and ENO3 interface. This unit came with 2 10 gigabit connections and 2 1 gigabit connections as part of its network package. Again, go watch R730XD video for all of the rundown on that. So a couple things we're going to address. If you note here, we've got .1.244 and .1.299 as the addresses. There's a couple of ways you can go about setting up your networking. However, I'm going to take a very simple approach, and we're going to put everything on the 10 gigabit fiber, easily able to handle a lot of traffic. So go to your networking tab, and you do want to make sure that you're on the right one here. It's best to pick up your session on your other address. So we're going to go to the 242 address here. So that's 192.168.1.242. And this way you won't have your actual session disconnecting from you, which can be a little bit hard if you are new to this to understand what to do next. Okay, so we're gonna go to the networking here, and we are on our 1 gigabit connection, but we're gonna adjust the 10 gigabit network connection. And so what we're gonna do is disable DHCP and also disable auto configure IPv6. I don't have a functional IPv6 inside my house, so that makes sense for me to do. So I'm just gonna give this a quick description of 10GBE-1. And our alias is the IP address. So set this outside of your DHCP range. My DHCP range, I believe, is 220 to the rest of the block. So I'm gonna set this at like 131. So 192.168.1.131 block, we're gonna go with 24. Click on save, and you can adjust this if you needed to, but we have the same default gateway, so we don't need to do that. So we'll click skip, and we'll hit test changes. We'll click on confirm, test changes, and if everything worked out, so now we're at 131. You have 60 seconds basically to do this. And so it's gonna say, hey, do you wanna save the changes when you get here? So quickly kind of scurry over there and do save the changes. So as we see now, we don't have ENO3 connected at all. If you wanted to adjust ENO3 and get it to connect, you could set DHCP here and have it auto assign an address to it again. And we're gonna do that, and I'm gonna call this, I'll call that GBE-1. And we'll hit save. And test changes again, confirm. And that looks right there. So we'll go ahead and save changes. This gives you a fallback address. So you have a static IP address now on the 10 gigabit networking that is .131. So if you're creating a network mapped share, you want to do that over your 10 gigabit connection. So you can come to your PC, right click, add network location, click on next, choose a network location, and we're going to do //192.168.1.131 / again, media share. There we go. And it'll give you the option to name it if you want to change the name of it, and we'll click finish. And so now we are over in our 10 gigabit connection to our media share. This is where we'll be sending some files back and forth to. All right, so we've got our folder with some of the video files from this production in it, and they're actually pretty big. So if I select all of them, you can see we're at 145 gigabytes, which it's not uncommon, but pretty big for this production. And if we take a look at the dash over here, we'll be able to keep an eye on this transfer and the memory in particular, which is one of the cool things about the way that ZFS and TrueNAS work and stream into your system RAM first and then buffer out of there onto your disks. So I'm going to go ahead, start the transfer. Everything here, including the Windows, everything. The TrueNAS, clearly, we've just installed that in that other video that we just released where we went over the R730XD, so make sure to check that out. And big shout out and thank you to our channel members. And if you are interested, consider subscribing to be a channel member to the Digital Spaceport where you get things like behind the scenes access. But let's start this transfer here and we'll just copy this, come over to our media share and paste. And you can see that we are doing pretty good here right off the bat and in the 900 megabyte per second range, which is doing pretty good. Now we do see it falling down and picking back up as certain files complete and end, but a lot of those files are huge in size. Several of them are 20 to 25 gigabytes each. And if you're doing 4K video, this is something that is actually fairly common. And if you look over here, you can see the cache, the memory cache, kind of behaving as we would expect it to behave and shrinking down a little bit as we continue pushing things over. Now, 145, of course, is larger than 128. So at the tail end here, we should see something interesting, which is either we'll see the performance fall off dramatically, or, much as I hope, I really hope this happens, we'll see that we actually are able to sustain the speed and just start writing directly to the disks, and theoretically, it should be able to keep up pretty easily with that. Yeah, we're almost to a gigabyte a second, so this is just 1500 MTU, like I said, nothing special has been done. Everything super stock. Shows you what kind of performance you can get on an R730XD and TrueNAS just off the bat with very cheap 10 gigabit networking gear. And we're getting close to the free amount of memory up here closing out. So we're at about 19, 18 gigabytes left. So pretty soon we should be completely saturated. Okay, so you saw that drop down there into the 600s, 700s, but it's actually coming right back up. So yeah, we took a little bit of a performance hit there and to the 700s. It looks like as it spools off one file and goes over to the other, it's dropping down in performance and then going back up, but that's still really good. The response to get back up there is not quite as fast as when you're hitting just your DDR4. Of course, DDR4 has amazing low latency, much better than any platters could, but this is really good. I mean, that was a very good transfer. So I would say that is a wonderful test. Of course, we're going to test out some more high performance stuff on the R730XD and higher networking speeds than we're looking at today. But you need to hit like and subscribe and ring that bell so you get notified when we do that. And so you can see that you get great performance with TrueNAS just out of the box, and it is a really good evolving operating system for storage mainly focused, but you see with the LXC integration and of course VMs, and of course now Docker, that's actually the first main player that I know of that is doing that, aside from, oh no, it's actually, yeah, the LXC part of it is unique to TrueNAS. So great, kudos to them. Really awesome to see this kind of stuff happening. I'm a big believer in the Incus project, and I think that's really the way forward, and LXC containers are probably the best way for virtualization, and especially when it comes to multi-using your valuable resources like GPUs. Nothing is quite as good as an LXC at doing that. So I hope you've enjoyed this how to get started, up and running, and just general, hands-on beginner's guide for TrueNAS. Really good, strongly recommend it. Let me know what your storage solutions look like in the comments below. I also want to shout out to our channel members. Big thank you for you guys, and definitely appreciate all the support you toss to the channel. And if you're interested, you should consider joining, because we do things like give out extras and video releases of things that are behind the scenes, stuff you're not going to see elsewhere. So I hope you have a good day, and I will check you out next time.